This is The Great Equalizer, a parenting podcast about the realities of being a mom
or dad
in the 2020s. We are your hosts, Sam
and Charlene.
and we believe we're all rocking the same kind of crazy.
So let's get real, let's get honest, and let's have a laugh about the ups and downs of our current upside down. Hashtag no judgies.
On this episode of The Great Equalizer, we're calling a code red.
Tackling Shark Week.
Surfing the crimson waves.
Spilling the tea on Aunt Flo.
Fighting the rooi gevaar.
Screaming Bloody Mary.
We're taking the train to menstruation station. It's periods, guys. We're talking periods. Hello. Yeah, this has been a long time coming, but we're finally pulling the trigger on this episode, an episode covering all things menstruation, but it's as part of a global charity initiative called the Podcast-thon. So before we get into all things period talk, Charlene, before we paint the town red, but why don't you tell our listeners what Podcast-thon is all about and why we're doing it?
Okay, well, you mentioned it's a global initiative, but how we became involved is as podcasters, we are part of the South African Podcasters Guild, which was founded last year in 2024. And they reached out a while ago to say, hey guys, there's this global initiative that has now just been extended to South Africa called Podcast-thon. And basically what it is podcasters unite and produce content that amplifies, creates awareness, and talks about or is dedicated to a charity of your choice. And the idea is that during a specific time frame, these podcast episodes globally will then be released. And this year it's going to happen between the 15th of March to the 21st of March. And so over the course of that time period, various episodes will be released by podcasters globally. It's never been done or been extended to the South African market before. So we're super excited. Mm-hmm. Originally it was just in, it was mostly French-speaking, over 300 French-speaking podcasters. And in 2024, it grew to 400. And this year, as far as I'm aware, it's going to be in excess of 1,600 podcasts participating. Okay. And basically, the idea is that we podcast for good. We have a voice, we have a platform, and to use our platform to create awareness for charities is what we want to do. And so that brings me to our chosen nonprofit organization that we've selected to speak about, and it is called the Menstruation Foundation.
Yes, okay. So we've been cooking up a series of episodes around this topic, menstruation, for more than 2 years now, hence our chosen foundation. It's about damn time that we raise our voices about women's health rights, and we'll be going into more detail on this later on in the show, right?
Yes, for sure. Now, a large part of women's rights is the right to dignity during menstruation. Mm-hmm. Too many women, however, are not able to exercise this right, which is what our episode today is in aid of.
Right. It's something that you and I, for one, take for granted. But there's one organization, well, there's plenty in South Africa, but one in particular that really has caught our eye over the years, that shouts loud about period poverty and giving our young South African women the dignity they deserve. So as you mentioned, nonprofit organization, the Menstruation Foundation is who we have chosen to support through the Podcast-thon, through this episode for the Podcast-thon. 3 out of every 10 girls in South Africa stay at home. They miss school during their periods because they lack access to sanitary pads. And it's not because it's because of a shame stigma, and it's because of a lot of things, but you forget that it's also because there's no menstruation support. And what do we mean by that? Not just sanitary pads, because days of yore people made their own
fabric cloth.
They made their own plans. So for people that are going down that route, think about when you don't have running water at your school, which is a reality for so many of our young schoolgirls. You don't have running water. How do you
navigate that during your school day? And if you think about being a teenager and how much judgment and meanness there can be in your community amongst your peers, you don't want to be made fun of. You don't want to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's just downright impossible, actually.
Yeah. It's also just, it's not fair. And their ambassador and co-founder, Siv Ngesi, he says, if men bled once a month, sanitary products would be free. Condoms are free and sanitary products are not. It's a failure of justice. And I could not agree more with that statement.
Absolutely. Again, to quote the Menstruation Foundation, they have said the culture of silence around menstruation limits the ability of women and girls to equally participate in society. It undermines their social status and their self-esteem. We give women the right to go to school, to play sports, to go to work, and to participate in life, despite not being able to afford sanitary products.
Exactly. And where is the equality and justice in that?
Right. So, Charlene, as the Great Equalizer, what are we doing about it?
Well, we're putting our money where our mouth is. We hereby pledge to donate 240 Rand a month to the Menstruation Foundation for the next 6 months at least, which it basically sets up 2 schoolgirls a month with all the sanitary support that they need for a year.
Oh, okay. That's, look, it's crucial it makes a difference. And so in total will make a difference to 12 girls. For me, it's a small contribution in the grand scheme of things, 240 Rand a month, with over 7 million women in South Africa missing school, sport, varsity or work because of a lack of access to sanitary pads. This is really just like a teeny drop in the ocean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is. And it might seem small and insignificant. However, if the TGE community stands together in this commitment, that one drop becomes many. It takes many to make a difference. And we can make a huge difference in the lives of these young South African girls. So what do you say, squad? Hello, listeners. Shall we do it? Guys, just stay tuned till the end of the show and keep an eye on our show notes and social media for more information on how you can get involved, how you can help. If this is something that you feel passionate about like we do, let's do it. Let's get involved.
But for now, on with the show, Charlene. What do you say we chat about Aunt Flo? Yeah, it's I personally, as the producer, have been proper dragging my feet on this. I think it's because I feel so passionately about women's health rights. I want to do it right. I want to do it perfectly. I want to do, firstly, in terms of period poverty, I want to do our young women justice. And also us as women and our daughters. How do we tackle this topic with the finesse that it needs?
And it's such a broad discussion as well. It's not just about, it's very multifaceted, the concept of womanhood and growing into your womanhood and starting to have your period. It's got so many facets. So it's a big discussion.
It's a lot. And we will be growing this discussion past periods and into general women's sexual health. But for now, we really are starting where that all begins. Women's health. How do you differentiate yourself when you're young?
You go from a young girl to a woman.
To a woman, and that's largely when your period starts. Like, you have buds that start growing, you start growing boobs, and eventually you grow over a certain weight. I think it is really weight-based. There are other factors at play, but I won't go into the science of that just yet. When that period starts is when you know you've changed for good, and for me, it limited me when I started, and I'll get into that, but I want to know how old you were when you started your period and what your experience was. What was the vibe? Were you scared, sore, proud, embarrassed? Was it like finally, you're here? Did you know it was coming? Was it a mush surprise? Give me the tea.
It was kind of, I won't say it was a non-event, but I wasn't that anxious or nervous obviously there's a certain amount of anticipation because you're like, I wonder when it's going to happen for me. But My mom was very open with me, which I'm super grateful for. We were able to talk about it, and it wasn't just shortly before I was due to start my period, but it was an ongoing conversation as I was growing up and becoming, going from a little girl to a young girl. And then she explained to me how it works, why it happens. We had comfortable conversations about it. And I think that genuinely helped me to not feel scared and nervous about it. I do remember wondering if it was going to hurt. My mom reassured me that it wasn't unbearably painful.
Because it's blood.
Yes. So you're like, I am bleeding from my body. Usually I realize that now because of my daughter who keeps asking me, does it hurt? We'll go into our discussions with our children, but it's become apparent to me, and it never occurred to me before. But now that I'm having these conversations with my kids, I realize it must be so scary, because even though I don't remember ever feeling scared around it,
neither.
Which I'm super grateful for, because I can see how you can feel scared.
Absolutely.
And I mean, if you cut yourself or you fall and you graze your knee, or you have an accident and you bleed from that place, it hurts, it burns, it stings. It depends on the kind of injury, but it's pain. That bleeding and pain are synonymous.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what I remember, because I started puberty quite young, and so I was really in the spotlight. I was like the only one in my whole grade. All the other girls, all of my friends were still like skinny schoolgirls,
Yes.
and I was filling out.
Yes.
My thighs were broadening, my breasts started forming. My mom had to coax me into wearing a crop top under my white school shirt because I had buds, I was growing boobs. And I remember just hating every second of that development, because I was the only one, because I was singled out.
I get that, yeah.
I hated it. I wasn't the girl who went, Mom, I need to go buy a bra. So-and-so has a bra. Da, da. I was like, so-and-so does not have a bra. They're all still running around at the pool without tops because they have nothing.
Yeah.
And I am now this big oaf. I was the biggest in my grade. And not necessarily like fat or
not
overweight.
It's the shape of your body that changes.
But I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I felt
big.
Big. I felt like an oaf. One of the boys at school called me I'm going to get this wrong. I think he called me a Yeti or Sasquatch. He called me a Sasquatch.
Sasquatch. Oh my God.
Because when you slow dance with the boys at that age, you start having like disco parties, and it was our first schoolboy parties vibes. And he was a friend of mine, but he realized he was smaller and I was bigger than him, and he was just like, "You're like a bit of a Sasquatch, Sam." And I still feel at times like a Sasquatch,
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I've never felt petite or small or cute.
Yeah, neither have I. But that's just my genetics. I'm not a petite person.
So for me, period just was part of that whole growing hair in your private area on your labia, and I hated it. And my mom, because I had developed so early, my mom knew it was all coming. I started, I just think the balance there was a bit off as my hormones were changing. So I would have, infections there. I'm really just trying to normalize this talk. As
yes,
like weird.
Yeah. No, we have to be honest
TMI
about this.
is what this is. I remember getting a lot of sort of yeast infections leading up to when I started spotting. And I called my mom and I was just like, the spotting's not, or the discharge is not. Discharge was very like colloquial in our household because of the way that my mom just spoke it into our conversation. I said, the discharge is not white anymore, it's brown. And she's just like, yeah, and she was almost excited for me.
That's nice.
Yeah, but I couldn't really understand
the
it.
excitement, yes.
And I remember realizing at that point, which is also just a lapse in education, as much as open as what my mom was, I think as adults, we assume a lot.
Yes.
Of what our kids know.
Yes.
And I was like, where does it come out of? I had no idea there were two holes, one that you pee out of.
Yes, your
and
urethra, and then, yes.
I don't know. Nobody sat me down and said there are two holes down there. And this is, you pee out of a different hole to the one that you bleed out of.
At that age, you wouldn't have had biology at school where you see the physical anatomy of the reproductive system.
You don't have thoughts of putting anything in there.
No,
necessarily.
you don't.
No. So that was it for me. That was the like realization of like, oh, there are two holes. And that leads, if I go far enough in there, it goes into my body.
Yes.
And that's where the blood will come out of. My mom very nicely explained, she explained it well to me, of how you're not fertilizing an egg, and then that it's literally just the lining of your uterus that flashes out. And she had given me a book as well that explained it, and I read the book. So it was all kind of scientifically explained. But I remember that being like a aha moment of there are two holes. And sanitary pads, tampons. What did you start with tampons? Did you use just sanitary pads?
No, I was terrified of tampons. Also,
me too.
I will say this, that there was this running joke amongst the boys. So I think I was lucky because I was kind of in the middle of the bunch of girls. So there were some early
bloomers, yeah.
Ones that we knew, oh, she's ready. We weren't teasing about it, but you would kind of know it's around about that time when it's going to start happening now. And I went to school a year early, so I was a year younger than all my peers. At the time, I didn't connect the dots to be like, what? I was like, wow, when am I going to start? I don't have boobs yet. My friends have boobs. I didn't make the connection. So towards the end of my, standard 5, grade 7 year, it only started happening for me. Whereas some girls started already the year prior or early in the school year. And so it kind of took the stress off for me because I was kind of part of the pack. Like you're saying I was the only one. You feel different and let out. I didn't feel different. I felt part of, this is just what's happening to everyone.
Were you all talking about it as friends? Was it like a thing among the girls?
Close friends, we were discussing it, but it wasn't, I won't say it was like comfortable flowing conversation. It would come up and then the conversation, it was very surface level. Nobody was talking about it in depth or kind of biologically or scientifically how it works or things like that. It was just so I started my period last week and we were supportive of each other, like, are you okay? Is it really sore? Kind of inquisitive also because we know it's coming for us. But it wasn't, I won't say it wasn't comfortable conversation. We all were a little bit awkward around the topic. And also, you don't know how much their parents have told them. Yeah. So I wasn't that and I wasn't uncomfortable that I would get it wrong. I was kind of like trusting that my mom told me everything there is to know. So I was cautious not to share too much because I wasn't sure how much they knew. A. B, I didn't want to make anyone feel stupid if I knew more than what they knew. And C, I didn't want to be called out as that's not what my mom said or that's not true kind of thing. So it was very awkward. It wasn't often discussed and it wasn't discussed in depth. However, there was some running jokes, and I think this was initiated by the boys, which I thought was, and I can't remember if this was early in high school or at the end of primary school. It was such a long time ago, but I do know that there were some boys who were joking around about tampons, the sole purpose for tampons being to get you used to the sensation of penetrative sex.
Oh, okay. Have you seen the size of a tampon? Good luck with that, friends.
Now, if you don't know, I mean, I had never seen a penis in like real life at that point. I didn't know what size these boys' penises were. And I was just like, I don't want to be known for that. Like I thought if somebody knew that I was using tampons, that even though my mom explained to me that that is what the actual purpose of a tampon is. I didn't want to be perceived as using tampons because I'm kind of getting ready to learn how this feels, you know? So
You see kids, hey?
It's
Kids
awful.
can come with the weirdest shit.
I mean, I didn't even tell my mom that. I didn't think it was worth mentioning because
Yeah.
I started with sanitary towels and I was comfortable with them. And so I didn't feel the need. We didn't swim at school as a sport. So it wasn't like, oh, I can't swim because I'm wearing a sanitary towel.
What did I do during swimming?
So
I can't even think. How uncomfortable.
And I was nervous about using tampons because I was convinced that it was going to hurt. The concept of putting something in there just wasn't. I wasn't comfortable with that.
So my mom was exasperated with me because I refused to use tampons. And I do think for a similar reason, just that I know now, you know, when my period started, we hadn't had sex ed yet. And I knew the mechanics of sex because of my mom's openness with me about it. So I was precocious. I knew very early on about a lot of things. And I did also just tend not to talk about it with my friends because they were more, I won't say naive, but not as informed as I was. And I was very aware of that.
Yeah, that's the thing also. You don't know what your friends have been told by their parents. And you don't want to be the kid that's like, oh, this is how it works, da-da-da-da-da.
And I was already the kid that from grade 4, so from when we were 10, and girls started like inviting me over to their house, and I was trying to make friends with newer kids that came into the school from the senior phase. Their moms were advising them not to be friends with me.
Because you're too mature.
And they really thought that sexual maturation, so biological maturation, equated to me being sexually precocious, which was not the case. If anybody's listened to our sex episodes, that is like far from exactly what
I can't, just because I've grown boobs doesn't mean I'm like in my intellectual and emotional state ready to be sexually active. I don't even know what's happening to my body.
So that's an important thing also to remind ourselves of as parents. If you see a more sexually mature girl or boy, or biologically mature girl or boy among our kids, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a bad influence. I always have to keep that top of mind because I've had a few, like, if Elijah is friendly with older boys, what are they going to teach my son? Oh my God. And I just have to like say the Hail Mary and, you know, pray that they're not going to influence my child in certain ways. And I'm just like, okay, but Sam, you pot, kettle. Yeah.
Exactly.
And, you know, in dealing with this in my writing about menstruation, I revisited Judy Blume's Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which is like a seminal talking about banned books and the what we're in at the moment, the socio-political shit show we're in at the moment. Judy Blume was banned for years and years and years because of the openness with which she talked about periods and menstruation. And in that book is a character, I think her name is Laura Dankner. I stand to be corrected. Also sexually, biologically, by saying sexually now, I mean biologically mature. She had big boobs that all the girls coveted, and they were just like, oh, she's probably just a slut after the teacher.
Yes.
When in fact, at the end of this book, spoiler alert, at the end of this book, Laura just wants to be friends with the other girls, you know, and Margaret realizes this. So if you do have a girl, anybody listening who's broaching that sort of puberty, adolescent stage, Judy Blume still, I can vouch for this, Judy Blume is still an amazing resource and no longer banned yet in South Africa. And there was a movie out about it that came out last year, the year before, I think 2023.
Really?
With Rachel McAdams, yes. She was the mom.
Oh, no ways. Okay.
It's on Amazon, so check it out. It's really just an excellent resource. When I read it again in preparation for my writing and thinking about menstruation just in our discussion, it's still such a good resource and so relatable because it's just a gaggle of girls wanting boobs, waiting to know when their period will come. And even though I had a very different experience, I could still relate very much to this identity crisis.
And the anticipation of this big event.
So we've dealt a lot with identity crises on the show, on the Great Equalizer, but from a matrescence perspective. So it was really interesting for me to delve into it and consider what that identity crisis looks like from an adolescent perspective.
Yeah.
And I, for one, I hated it. I will go through childbirth 5 times over before I do adolescence again. I hated it.
Yes. Listen, I mean, I think back now, I didn't hate it as much. I didn't hate that, I guess, again, because I wasn't singled out. I didn't feel different or other. I kind of felt, I kept it quiet. I didn't really, I think might have told my best friend the day after it happened, but I definitely told my mom. She was at work. I remember I had everything I needed. I went to the bathroom. I was like, oh gosh, it's happened. So I got my stuff. I cleaned, got my sanitary towels, did my thing, washed my hands, walked out of the bathroom. We had a home phone because there were no cell phones. Mm-hmm. This is how long ago that was. Phoned my mom and I was like, Mommy, it's happened. And she's like, oh, cool. Are you okay? Have you got what you need? Reassuring.
You must, okay, hang on though. You're very calm for Charlene. How I would know if something major happens in your life. Be realistic.
No, I was calm.
Were you?
From what
Mommy, I think it's happening now. I think this is it.
I think I had prepared myself. You know what the thing is with me, though, is I can handle just about anything. I mean, Sam, if you were to murder someone, I mean...
No, I know this.
I would
know this.
But if you give me a warning...
Okay.
If you're like, I'm going to murder this person next week.
So I can't murder
Don't spring it on me.
Okay.
Because then I'm going to flip out.
I've got to really prepare. This has to be premeditated.
I can handle... I mean, that was a terrible joke. I apologize. Let me use a different example. I can handle just about anything. And I can, no matter how bad it is, if I have some time to process the information and I can be like, weigh my options, be like, okay, if this happens, then we'll do this. If this happens, we'll do that. I can be quite calm. Where I don't do so well is like spur of the moment. I can be a spur of the moment fun person, but when
not spur of the moment drama.
Yes, when big things happen and it happens in the moment unexpectedly, it takes me a while to gather my thoughts to be like, okay, what is our plan of action, So I wasn't flipping out because I was anticipating it and I had prepared. I knew what I needed. I had everything. I had my little pouch with my sanitary towels, everything ready. The thing I do remember on the day that I was a little bit nervous about was coming out of the bathroom and carrying sanitary towels or something in my hand.
You got a little baggie.
I had it in a baggie.
And if there's no she-bin, which sometimes there isn't, you got to wrap up your sanitary towel.
Yes.
And
then go dispose of it. So that I was nervous about kind of bumping into my older brother in the passageway that he might see. Because I remember a short while before that, I also had an infection and I had told my mom about it when I got home from school. And she said, go have a shower or a bath, go to my room. There's sanitary towels there, little panty liners for the discharge in your underwear. So she coached me how to take care of it. So I had done that. And when I came out of her room, I had the panty liners in my hand and my brother bumped into me in the passage. He was like, why are you digging in mom's things? I'm going to tell her. And I was like, Josh. I was like, whatever my brother's name is, he shall remain nameless.
Nicholas.
Yes. I was like, she knows. You can phone her, but she knows. And I was so embarrassed and I just started bawling and I ran into the bathroom and I slammed the door.
I would have decked my brother. I would have decked him.
He wasn't being malicious. I think he just didn't think that his baby sister might be in a place where she now needs something like this. And he thought he's an older brother. He's got to be responsible for our behavior in the afternoons. And so he has to report this indiscretion to my mother, So I remember feeling a little bit of dread. Oh my God, I hope I don't bump into my brother because now I'm going to have this explanation.
And I wonder now, was he not told? Was there no family reception of? I mean, I don't know if my brother ever knew that when I started, how I started. I also have an older brother, and can't remember necessarily telling him. Although when I did tell him things that were secrets, I kissed this boy, or I did this naughty thing, or I whatever. We would be in each other's confidence. So probably if I was struggling with something to do with my body or my period, my brother was normally very open about it, and wasn't really policing me ever. So there was a closeness to that, I suspect, which I would, my kids don't have a sister. But I hope we're going to be going into how we parent our children, so we'll go into it. But yeah, it's something to think about, how we were parented, what our siblings knew, how much they knew, how they reacted. I can't remember my family celebrating me as a woman. I just remember my mom was pleased. She had a woman now who was she was almost excited for me to enter adolescence, I think. And like I say, she was really exasperated that I refused to use a tampon. And it was eventually, I was maybe 15 or 16, maybe a little bit later, I think it was 15, 16, that I started using tampons because I was dancing. And I remember being on stage and kind of marking during rehearsal, and my dance teacher shouting at me, and I'm wearing the costume that I was supposed to wear, and I'm dancing, but I'm like really not doing well because I'm so cognizant of this blood gushing out of me. And you feel so like all eyes are on you. You got these lights on you, and it's just like, oh my God,
it's a nightmare.
Blood's just gonna come seeping out of this costume that's not mine. And my mom was just like, why did you dance like that? And shut me out. And I just said, I'm on my period. I just felt uncomfortable. And that was the turning point. She's just like, right,
that's it.
You are wearing tampons. You can't let it. I suppose it was a lesson in not letting
it control your life.
Yeah.
Yes.
And kind of taking the bull by the horns. Yeah. You know, taking charge.
Yeah. Taking charge of what you have control over. You actually can make your own life easier because you have control over this thing to a degree. Yes.
And so that was the turning point for me. And I remember still being uncomfortable with it and putting it in and sitting at school on the biology stools, but I never put it in deep enough.
Yes, and then you feel it pressing. It's
so I sat on those damn biology stools, and you're just like on that pubic bone. You're like on the point. And I was sitting next to one of my male friends, and he's just like, "Are you okay?" Like I was wriggling around. I was just like, I can't tell him. And the whole time as a girl, the logic doesn't prevail, not because you're a girl, but at these times when you're so emotional and you're so self-aware, the logic doesn't prevail. And I was just like, he knows. He knows.
Something's up, yeah.
Like on the first day of my period when I was 10 years old was the 1st of August. I'll never forget that day.
That is young, Sam.
And when we wore jeans. Like, thank God, we wore jeans to school. I didn't even have like a dress that I had to wear, like a pinafore that I had to worry about. I had bottle green, like dark denim jeans. So as a woman, you now know that you got nothing to worry about if you're wearing a full brief panty and a big panty liner.
It's not
or
gonna
like
seep through on your clothing, yeah.
But I remember feeling like I was wearing a nappy.
Because it's also a strange sensation.
With this
all of this stuff in your clothing is uncomfortable. And then also just in terms of the flow, when it flows out, it's not constantly flowing, but there sometimes are like
when it does,
bursts of it. And then you feel that warm sensation between your legs because it just came out and you're like, oh my gosh. Like as old as I am to this day, I still feel sometimes like, oh boy, I got to get to a bathroom because that feels like it's bad.
This does not feel like normal bodily fluids.
Yes.
This is Aunt Flo bodily fluids.
She's arrived, yes, yeah.
So I'll never forget feeling like also I'm wearing a nappy and looking at the bums of all the girls in front of me at assembly and just looking and seeing like, is that what I potentially look like to the people behind me, or can they see this bulky nappy as if I'm a 2-year-old toddling around in a nappy?
Yeah.
You know, that's what it feels like. It's the worst.
It's uncomfortable. It's not great.
So we are gonna touch on what our relationships with our periods now. But first, I think just on that note of where we were at, how it is we want to be talking to our kids about periods, right? So, how have you broached that subject? You've got a boy and a girl of similar age. That's also where my kids differ, is that they're 4 years apart.
Yeah.
So how have you broached the subject, and how have you managed to talk about it with your boy versus talking about it with your girl?
So at the moment, because they're so close in age, conversations tend to kind of happen simultaneously. So either we're driving in the car and Jessie has a question and her brother's next to her. And because to her, they don't see each other as separate. They're just this little unit. So anything I want to know, my brother can know, kind of thing. So there's no like, oh, this is something for girls or this is something for boys. But also we don't navigate things in the home like that.
In isolation.
Yeah. So we haven't had like an official sit down to talk about these things. But over the last few years, I'd say 3 or 4 years, some questions have come up. They've seen me in the bathroom changing, from one sanitary item to the next, or putting a fresh one in, or whatever. Or sometimes if I have, just because of being premenopausal at the moment, sometimes my flow seems to be heavier than normal. So I'd have to like double up with a sanitary towel as well as some tampons. And so they've seen these things. And then also the tampons come in, the ones that I use are in like very colorful little wrappers.
Right.
So it looks like sweeties, and they're
My kids think that they're toys. Yeah.
And they're so intrigued by it. So they've asked, what is that? And so I've had to explain. And it's kind of like a compounded conversation. So every time we talk about it, it builds a little bit. So what I initially mentioned to them, they become more inquisitive and they ask more questions. And then we add another layer and another layer and another layer. So we're at the point now where we're talking about the changes in your body, and when your hormones change and you, as a boy, you start growing pubic hair, your voice changes and you get the little stonies, or those parts of your body changes. And I've explained to Jess also the changes that she can expect. And so I have tried to just always say to them that it is normal and it's going to happen to you. And Jessie wants to know when is it going to happen? And I've always said to her, it's hard to say, but I've explained to her that these are the factors that you would consider when you get to that stage and you start seeing these things happening in your body. It means that you're getting closer to that stage. So we haven't had like in-depth conversation, and also not like the biology behind it, but they do understand that it is the woman's body basically preparing to become ready for childbirth eventually. And that's why your body changes like that. Josh knows that it won't happen to him, but other things will happen to him. And he tends to just like, okay, that's weird. Or, okay, that's gross. And then he kind of dismisses it and walks away. I think because he probably is just like, oh, thank God I don't have to worry about that.
Sure.
So I'm going to go this way.
This has nothing to do with me at this point.
This is a problem I don't need to be worried about. And so I've tried to encourage him. If he said, oh, that's gross, not to dismiss him, but I've said to him, I understand how it can seem that way, but try to remember that you're going to get to a point where you might choose a female partner or a girlfriend or a wife one day, and her body will be going through these things. So I'm sharing this with you so that you, even though you're not physically going to go through it, you'll have some understanding for what it entails. And if anything, just empathy for her because of her body and the changes that her body's going through. Jessie's adamant, does it hurt? Oh gosh, I'm not looking forward to that. I'm scared. What if
So
it hurts?
also because the older we get and the more our hormones fuck around with us, the worse it gets. Post childbirth, like postpartum periods have been so much worse for me than my periods ever were before.
Yeah, I'm not loving them at the
I'm
moment.
ill 2 days out of the month. The day that I get it, I'm like on my way to the bed, and if I can spend the day in bed, which never happens, but if by some miracle I can, I'm bedridden on day 2 of my period. Never, and I've been having my period since I was 10.
Yeah.
Never up until I was post Noah, so I was 34. Not until I was 34 did I
Have it where you were like debilitated by it.
where I know you get so many women suffering from endometriosis,
Yes,
for instance,
yes.
from their teen years, that they are bedridden. And that's also another instance of sort of period poverty is it goes undiagnosed for so long, and girls are just told to kind of suck it up. So I can't vouch for that pain so early on. I would pop 2 painkillers maybe at the worst time of my period, which, by the way, I'll never forget this, is called menorrhagia.
Menorrhagia.
Menorrhagia. Do you know how I know this? I used to have this computer game that my mom got, like, it was called Girl Talk, and it had a secret diary on that you unlocked on the computer, and different facts about your period. So I guess that's just all just coming to me now that there was a quiz that you could take.
Okay.
And I remember it's just like, what's the heaviest, or what is menorrhagia? And that they would have like options. And one of the options was the heaviest part of your period, and another option was like a chocolate dessert. And eventually I got to know the answers to all the questions, and my friends would come over so that they could play the game.
You
and
were the
also
coolest
learn
kid.
about
I wish
it.
I'd known you at school.
I did not feel very cool, but that game gave me some street cred. Like
Nice.
my friends could come over and kind of learn about their bodies, and this is what it's like to be a teenager. So when we were like 11, 12, 13, before we got to high school, we would all gather around my computer to play this.
That's so
this
cool.
Girl talk game. Yeah. So menorrhagia is the heaviest part of your period.
Okay.
And for me, even as going through sort of my 20s, I mean, we've often spoken about it. Not until after Noah did I ever need a super. I use the same brand. I use Kotex.
Yes.
Tampons. Not until after Noah did I need a super size. I always needed a small, like a mini.
Yes.
Or the normal size.
Right.
And then after Noah, it was like the fucking floodgates open.
Die slag van bloedrivier.
And how? Of course, after Noah. Of course. This little child that wrestled his way out of me.
So speaking of Noah, how have you, because you got 2 boys, how have you broached it with them? Have you? And
In
how?
a very similar way to what you do. I don't have them worrying about how it will happen to them. I do have Elijah worried about being a father and what it takes to be a father, which is a whole other discussion about sex. He really wants a girl, Charlene. The other day he told me he wants to be a teacher because he loves guiding younger kids.
Okay.
And he really would love a daughter. And Noah too would love a daughter. If they can't have a sister, then it's like they're going to have a daughter. So they both want to be dads. Noah doesn't really know the mechanics of sex just yet. He's 4 turning 5. Elijah does. And keeps asking how and why. And the reason it came up is because he assumed because Noah was cut out of me. I say that Noah came out of me kicking and screaming, but not out of me vaginally.
Yes.
He came out of me via C-section. And Elijah knows this. He knows about my cuts and my scar. And we had that whole discussion when Noah was born. And our discussion around sex and sexual health has always been very organic. I've just answered his questions.
Same for us.
And it got to a point where he just said to me, Mom, I really want to have kids, but I don't know if I'm ready for them to cut me open. And I don't know whether I've said this on the show before. I feel like I have because I've told the story so much. He thought that he was going to be cut open, where his semen comes out. So
You see,
what would that be? I want to use the anatomically correct information, and all I can think about is ball sack.
his testes?
His testes, but what do you call the skin?
I don't know.
The testes.
Ball sack is what I call it. Scrotum.
Scrotum. Anyway, he thought he was going to be cut open. The poor guy. And this always happens like at bath time, right? When they have these chats, I'm like, we're about to go to bed. We're at the finish line.
Like, we're so close, guys.
And this is when we had to have the discussion around, oh boy.
Are they going to cut open my scrotum to
will
be able
not
to have
be
a
cut
child?
open. Then he asked how, and I told him how. Now we're going into sex ed talk, but this is how. So he knows that you need to insert the penis into a woman's vagina to have a biological child in that way. And I kind of used the example of egg and semen as a seed and an egg and a seed, right?
Yeah, being fertilized. Yeah, the seed.
And the fertilization.
Fertilizing the egg, yes.
So trying to use sort of age-appropriate terminology, but keeping it correct, not saying ball sack.
Yes, yes.
And he didn't ask how the penis gets in the vagina. I'm assuming that will come a little bit later. But he did ask if it hurts. Because surely that hurts your penis. And I held back. And I was like, it doesn't. And he's like, but that's not fair, Mom. That childbirth hurts so much for a woman, but not for a man.
That's so sweet.
And I was like, yeah, you're quite right.
You're right.
Little feminist.
Life's not fair.
So I said, it's not fair. You are right. And thank you for being so empathetic in that way. And he is like that and guides his brother. So I'm really grateful for him in that respect, because when I am on my period and my kids have no sense of privacy, like I'll be like, Mommy needs some privacy, guys, can you just, and they're, oh, sorry, and they'll walk into the bathroom and shut the door. They're like, it's okay, Mom, you're fine. I closed the door.
There's no one else in the house. We're here and we're private now.
We're private. It's okay. We closed the door.
I meant I need privacy from you.
So I don't hide anything. They watch, and they're not like right up in there, but they watch as I pull a tampon out and wrap it up. I mean, this is something not even Ray is privy to for obvious reasons.
Yes.
Your husband doesn't need to be watching this cuck. But my kids
It is
are
decidedly
curious.
unsexy.
No,
Let's just say that.
It is. My kids watch and ask, Mommy, but does it hurt? And I explain that it doesn't hurt. The fact that the blood comes out doesn't hurt, but the fact that it is kind of
that there's some pain.
Sloughing. I've always hated that word, but that's the correct term for it. And it's sloughing.
Is that the term for it?
Sloughing. Like spelled as you would spell rough.
Yes.
It's sloughing. Your uterus is...
It's a good word.
It's a cuck word.
It's a cuck word, but it describes it well, in my opinion.
Your uterus is sloughing itself of the old lining in order to make way for the new egg.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So I also, if I'm in the bathroom and they'll knock, but if I'm busy like changing a tampon and they'll like knock, knock, and I'll be like, I'm busy. Mommy, I need to tell you this thing. I'm like, okay, come in. I don't stop what I'm doing or try and hide or conceal it. And I'm of the opinion that eventually when they start feeling uncomfortable, they'll stop coming in. They'll just be like, okay, Mom, I know you're busy in there. I just want to tell you this thing. So when you're done, can you come out, please, or whatever. Yeah.
Because I think it happened naturally with us and our parents, right? There was a time that I was just like, I'm no longer gonna stand in the bathroom while my dad pees, you know. But the other day, I have to tell this story.
Some families don't even do that.
I'm
aware of some families who are just like, not even your mom. You don't even see your mom naked. Like girls don't even see their.
So there we have just a different cultural approach, right?
See, yeah.
I want to finish up the discussion around our kids and just round up where we're going with this whole discussion in general. But I do have to say, Elijah, the other day, it was probably a couple of months ago, stood at the door and watched me fiddling, doing my thing, and had a very concerned look on his face and just went, "Oh, Mom, okay, are you on your period?" Very concerned. And I was like, not at this point. There is some discomfort there, but thanks for empathizing.
Yes.
And I've managed to say to him, it's not an illness. Sometimes I'm in pain, but I can just carry on as normal and reassure him. So I'm all for this type of like open conversation in this way. And I think we've got a lot of tools which we're going to link our listeners up with, right? These days for our girls, you have sanitary kits. There's a company called Blush Proof. We're going to load all of this up. Red parties. Some women, friends of mine, have given their daughters like red parties where it's just like all the women in the family come together and like aunties and friends come together to celebrate the girl coming of age. And there's like red food only, and you're watching specific red movies, or you do like a painting thing where you only use red paints or whatever. So you make it fun and you make it a memorable experience for your daughter. Sanitary kits, you know about this, right?
I mean, I think I had never thought of that idea. And then when I first heard about like a red party or whatever, I was like, oh my gosh, I mean,
how awkward.
What if the kid like feels like they don't want to make a fuss of this?
It's probably kid dependent.
I was just going to say, I suppose it depends on the child. But also what I was thinking is what's nice about that is that you give your child the opportunity to not feel alone in this thing, to be in a space where you are, and I suppose it depends on the family and historically how open you've been with one another. But you give your daughter the opportunity to ask questions about, or just to talk about, like to hear, like a sharing moment, like how was your experience? How was your experience? If you're comfortable with that, you know, I think it might remove some of the stigma.
Absolutely. Also, opening up, and I'm thinking about my nieces and my relationship, and you know, and girlfriends, from a woman's perspective of this like camaraderie you have when you open up the conversation, how you might be able to guide teenage girls as they develop sexually as well.
Yeah, because if you think about going to a support group for anything, this is a support group, but without the negative, like I'm going to a support group because I have an addiction issue or whatever. This is a support group to help you feel held in this life-changing moment, because from that moment, nothing will ever be the same again. It is like a switch gets flicked.
So speaking of the support group, this is where we're starting with periods, right? But we started the Great Equalizer as a support group for mothers, okay? And opening up really difficult discussions around maybe I'm not enjoying parenthood or mothering as much as Susan next to me, who seems to be loving life.
Yes, or maybe I'm struggling with my libido and I'm too ashamed to say, and I have no one to talk to about this.
Feeling out.
Yes.
So menopause is one of those taboo subjects. And this is, as we said in the very beginning, it's been a long time coming. And our discussion on periods is just the start of discussion on menstruation and the start of menstruation, what we've just spoken about now. The start of a much larger discussion that we want to get into as we grow into perimenopause, which you are now in the throes of. I suspect me too, going to the gynae next week. Thank you very much.
Yay, finally, appointment, hooray.
And menopause, perimenopause and menopause. People don't like to talk about it, but guess what? That's what we're here for.
Exactly. We got you. I think also just, I mean, and this is a larger discussion, I think that also to create awareness, because there were a lot of things happening to me in my body now recently or over the last 2 or 3 years that I didn't realize was menopause related or hormone related. And you might be a listener and you might be out there just like struggling fatigue or struggling this, or struggling with that. And you're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And so
not feeling yourself.
Yes, and having these conversations the way we would with our young girls, having these conversations about changes in your body if there's awareness, if we know better, we do better, and we're better equipped to be able to handle anything that comes our way.
Absolutely. So we're going to be learning, and we're going to be learning along with our listeners. Part of what we'll be covering is periods postpartum. We touched on that now. What's happening with your hormones? I want to ask an endocrinologist. Symptoms of the season change. Signs of early menopause, what full-blown menopause actually looks like. Because guess what? My mom didn't talk about it with me when she was going through it.
Exactly. And when do you know you're premenopausal? How long does it last? And when does actual menopause kick in? And how long does that last?
'Cause even a lot of healthcare professionals don't talk about perimenopause, don't acknowledge that 10 years prior, you could already be experiencing these symptoms.
People just think it's, I don't have hot flashes yet, so it can't be that.
We're going to be asking some experts. We're going to ask them to field questions, and your questions, listeners, about hormone replacement therapy, diet alterations, hacks for a smoother process, what works, what doesn't. We'll be answering some of your questions or put them to an expert who has the answers, as I said. And mostly we're just going to be going straight to the taboo, and steering ourselves and our viewers and listeners in the direction of resources that can help.
Yeah, because we found a lot of things in our recent journey that have been helpful, that have been great tools and great sources of information. And we want to share that so that you feel not alone.
Exactly. So again, stay tuned to our socials, guys, our website. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, because TGE Talks Menstruation will be coming to a podcast platform near you. And we promised you details, right, on where to find Siv Ngesi and the gang at Menstruation Foundation so that you can contribute to our girls in need of sanitary support.
Yes, it's quite simple. You can go to just Google Menstruation Foundation and they'll pop up. However, we'll also be putting the link in our show notes and on our socials, so you'll be able to find them there.
Remember, for as little as 120 Rand a month, you can make a huge difference in just one girl's life by providing them with a year's worth of sanitary products and a year's worth of stress-free schooling, sport, varsity, or work, or work.
Exactly. Head over to the Menstruation Foundation website, click donate, and we've just passed International Women's Day, and the 21st of March is Human Rights Day, of course. So this topic is crucial for every woman's human rights to equal rights.
Also, July is on our doorstep. Blink, blink, and we're there. So make donating to Menstruation Foundation your workplace's Mandela Day initiative. There's an idea.
Yes, there's one to do.
There's a lot that you can do with this for really just a small amount a month. And as we said before, if we do this collectively, we can make a huge difference to curb period poverty in South Africa. So, Charlene, how about we keep talking and talking and talking some more?
I love doing talking for a living. It's my jam. Yes. You guys, you know this. We hope that all our listeners will join in this conversation too. If you've got something to say about the show or about the topic, or you have questions, or you want to share your story about how evolving into womanhood or how your period started, please, obviously, we'll keep things anonymous if you wish to have them anonymous. But it's great to be able to share people's stories and on our platforms and even just in our discussions. And if you don't want it shared, let us know. Sam and I will look at them privately and just enjoy the interaction with our audience. Anything we've discussed, if you want to weigh in on the topic, you can even mail us on info@thegreatequalizer.co.za.
Or DM us a voice note on Instagram, record one on your phone, and pop us another mail. We're there for you.
Yes, and feel free to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel if audio is your preference. Otherwise, we're also on Apple, Spotify, and all the usual podcast platforms. Just Google us. You'll be able to find us there. Or if you log into Spotify or your local podcast or your podcast platform of choice, just search The Great Equalizer. We'll pop up. You'll see our faces.
You will. A huge shout out to our old and new listeners. Your support is so important to us, and so are your ratings, believe it or not. So wherever you are tuning in, drop us a little like or a hartjie or leave a comment. Let's get that engagement going, guys.
Yes, it really helps us. If you could give us a 5-star rating or drop us a line or two telling us what you like about the show or what you don't like about the show, that helps us to know what to do better and then what others can expect from this podcast as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Every review has the capacity to bring one mom or parent closer to sanity. I really do believe that.
Ultimately, the more we're seen, the better this podcast will do and the better we can do and be for you.
And so that's it for this week. Charlene, you are doing a good job.
And so are you.
In your mothering journey. Thank you. Until next time,
keep your mom game strong. Shout out to our producers over at Autumn Aperture and ARG Studios, including our editor, Ray Herbst, and sound engineer, Stephen Krill. Please review our show notes for more on the day's topic, our expert guests, and any links we might mention. And for more on the Great Equalizer, our website is always a good idea, www.thegreatequalizer.co.za, along with our social media platforms on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and now YouTube.